What could make a multi-billion-dollar transport empire collapse in mere hours? In the Pinnacle Freight boardroom in Denver, executives screamed as the $40 million loss blazed in red on the screen. Enough! Vincent Caldwell, the single millionaire father, slammed his fist on the table. Solutions, now! Sadie Monroe, the waitress, quietly pushed her drink cart. She scanned the tangled delivery map. "They've done everything backward," she muttered. Vincent spun around. "What did you say?" All eyes fell on her. Could her napkin really save an entire empire? All right, my dear audience, get ready for a story that will leave you speechless. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly empathize with what I'm about to share. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see viewers join us from every corner of the globe. 3 days ago, while the city still lay in sleepy silence, Sadie woke up. 5:45 a.m. The alarm hadn't yet chimed, but her eyes opened instinctively, as if her body had grown accustomed to the solitude that came with years of waking alone. In the small apartment tucked away in Aurora, on Denver's outskirts, everything remained hushed. She rose from the bed as gently as if she feared to rouse the sorrows slumbering in her mind. The tiny kitchen greeted her with a familiar scent: ginger tea. A small ritual that made her feel she still held some control. As the water began to boil, the pale dawn light filtered through the window, slipping past the faded curtain and spreading across the simple wooden table. There lay her open notebook, its pages crowded with sketches. Pencil lines, arrows, and notes stood out clearly under the soft glow. It was more than a notebook. It was the only place she allowed herself to dream. Sadie had once dreamed of becoming a logistics engineer, a job that sounded dry to many, yet to her it was a living world of calculations, logic, and precision. She adored numbers and was mesmerized by optimal delivery routes. But that dream was pushed aside when tragedy struck too soon. On the day her father died, Sadie's life froze. The University of Colorado, her favorite lectures, a brilliant future, all framed within one heartbreaking choice: to drop out and support her family. Since then, each morning she didn't enter a lecture hall but walked into a diner near downtown where she worked as a server. A tiring, repetitive job, yet a necessary one. Her mother's health was fragile, and her younger brother Owen was still in high school. He was the reason Sadie refused to collapse. On the bookshelf opposite her bed, the family photo taken at Rocky Mountain National Park still sat in place. 3 smiling faces holding hands against a peaceful backdrop. A snapshot of memory that anchored her whenever life felt too heavy. A soft ting from her phone interrupted her thoughts. The screen lit up with a brief message from Owen. "Sis, I have my physics exam today. Thanks for helping me study." Sadie stared at those words, then smiled. A quiet smile, not radiant, but warm. In her eyes shone not only pride, but a vague ache. How long before her own dream could be named? Her gaze returned to the notebook. The sketches lay unfinished, but before she could close the pen, she added another delivery route. Each time she did so, it felt as if she eased the weight pressing on her chest. The numbers, the routes, the precise calculations, they were Sadie's way of keeping her heart from shattering. Not because she believed the dream would come true, but because she needed a place where hope still lived. The clock signaled it was time. She rose, packed everything away as though following a programmed routine. The tea remained half-sipped, the notebook still open. But she had to go. Out there awaited a long shift, trays of food, orders to call out, forced smiles. At Pinnacle Freight, Sadie works in the ground floor cafe. Each morning, a hurried stream of customers pours in, their eyes never lingering on anyone behind the counter. She stands there, blending into the rush of activity. Her faded navy uniform makes her almost vanish among the expensive suits. Every latte she pulls, every step she retreats behind the counter, marks a heartbeat of silent waiting. Nobody knows Sadie. They only know their coffee will be hot, on point, on time, and she will never ask twice. Vincent Caldwell is one of the most regular and most distant customers. A single millionaire, his gaze ice-cold, his face rarely betraying emotion. He comes every day at the exact same time. He orders only black coffee. No sugar, no cream, no small talk. His eyes never stop at her. But to Sadie, his consistency means something. Not because he is Vincent Caldwell, the most powerful man in the building, but because that repetition offers a moment of stability, however brief, each day. Then, one morning like any other, he strode in with his usual purpose. He set down a thick stack of documents on the counter. But unlike other times, a small mishap occurred. The papers spilled onto the floor, scattering into loose sheets. He bent swiftly to gather them, but a few slipped beyond his reach. Sadie stepped out from behind the counter, stooping to help. Her fingers brushed a boldly printed diagram, its complex, coherent lines distinct under her touch. It wasn't unfamiliar. It was a delivery route, once the world she'd longed to inhabit. She stared at the blueprint. Her heart raced. As if drawn by memory's reflex, her eyes traced the key junctions. Then, almost before she realized it, she spoke. "Sir, I believe the Salt Lake City warehouse is causing a bottleneck." Her voice was steady, not loud but undeniably sure, as if she had crossed the fragile boundary between reality and the dream she once held. It wasn't courage. It was simply a moment when her heart seized its chance. But that chance was swiftly blocked. Vincent's assistant, a woman with gold-rimmed glasses, impassive expression, and a voice as cold as steel, stepped forward. She snatched the documents from Sadie's hands, her eyes passing over her like she was brushing away dust. "Mr. Caldwell has a meeting with Tokyo," she said, soft but clear. A full stop on that fleeting moment. Sadie stepped back. Her gaze dropped, her hand unconsciously gripping her apron. Vincent said nothing. He didn't look back. He left with his assistant, leaving behind the barista who had dared cross her invisible line. She returned to the counter, her pulse still racing. Everything snapped back into place. The call-outs resumed. But she was not the same. That diagram, those lines, those intersections, would not leave her mind. All day long, even as her hands moved rhythmically, her thoughts hovered over that logistics plan. A puzzle unsolved, yet utterly compelling. It haunted her. Not because she'd been heard, but because for 1 second she had been herself. 1 second to voice what she knew, what she loved, what she once dreamed. And now it shines like a small beam, cutting through the dust settled over her dormant dream. Sadie doesn't know what comes next, but she knows she is no longer the invisible barista of that morning. Inside her, a small door has opened. Nobody else sees it. But she knows well. It has not yet closed. Her shift ended in quiet fatigue. Sadie slipped out of the building unnoticed. She walked several blocks to a small bakery in Boulder. Nothing remarkable, except the feeling of pause, a moment to breathe and simply be herself. She chose a secluded corner table, ordered a simple sandwich and a glass of water, then drew a ballpoint pen from her apron pocket. On the white napkin, she began to sketch. Not a picture, but a diagram, a transport map with routes stretching like arteries through a congested system. She drew with the focused intensity of someone who cannot afford to waste a single thought. Each marked dot was a distribution center, each line a corridor she imagined as a rushing river. Narrow bridges, choke points, places where the flow stalled. She'd never attended a formal school in logistics, but nights spent learning online had taught her the fundamentals, principles that seemed dry on paper, but in her veins felt like life itself. As she traced the movement between two main warehouses, a child's voice piped up beside her. "What are you drawing that's so cool?" Sadie looked up to see a girl of about 9, her hair tied to one side, eyes bright with curiosity. Startled by the child's observation, Sadie smiled gently, set down her pen, and replied softly, "A way to make delivery trucks faster and save money." The girl nodded sagely. "My uncle works at Pinnacle. He's always saying the Omaha warehouse is slow. Trucks arrive but can't unload. They wait for hours." Sadie's breath caught. Omaha, one of the points she had redrawn twice without solving its bottleneck. The girl's casual remark unlocked the space she'd been searching for. She looked back at the sketch, and everything clarified. The problem wasn't with individual warehouses, it was that they never synchronized according to demand cycles. Each operated in isolation, with no holistic connection. Before she could second-guess herself, Sadie grabbed her pen and sketched along the napkin's edge. Her hand trembled, not with fear, but with the sense of holding something precious. A discovery, a way out. She redrew the flow of goods, adding transfer steps, dynamic routing based on inventory data, quick and decisive. She knew she had touched something real. Then, as the excitement ebbed, a chilly thought surfaced. Who cares? A waitress, someone who only carries trays and wipes tables. What right did she have to speak about transport optimization? The voice in her head sliced through her fledgling hope. She folded the napkin and stuffed it into her pocket, not to forget, but because she knew nobody would ever see it. The next day, her shift began as usual. Sadie stood behind the counter again, making coffee, handling cash, and answering customers with curt replies. Everything returned to its familiar cycle, but her mind did not. It waited for a sign. Then, mid-morning, as a group of executives passed by, a man's voice rang out, exasperated. "The Kansas City warehouse is overloaded again. Minneapolis is nearly empty." Sadie froze, hands still on the espresso machine. Her heart pounded, not because such complaints were unusual, but because they matched perfectly the map she had drawn. It felt as if the universe was affirming her insight, a confirmation no one needed to voice. She drew in a deep breath, her hand hovering over the paper cup. Inside her, doubt and determination collided. Maybe it was coincidence, but maybe it was her first chance in hundreds of invisible days. For the first time in a long while, she did not step back. She did not turn away. She simply stood there and listened, feeling something real beginning. Dear audience, take a moment to relax or grab a drink, then listen as the story unfolds. There are surprises ahead. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see viewers joining us from every corner of the globe. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story so we can keep bringing you more great tales. Sunday. While most of the staff rested, Sadie still took an extra shift in Pinnacle's 16th floor boardroom. She did not belong to that world, the world of pricey laptops, data charts, and cold strategic voices. But there she was, pouring coffee, clearing cups, silent as a shadow. The emergency meeting had been convened by Vincent Caldwell. The atmosphere in the room was leaden, each person seated in a corner, eyes glued to the screen, brows furrowed after hours of fruitless debate. They had tried every model, every scenario, and failed. Sadie moved quietly behind them, keeping her distance, yet her eyes flicked over every graph, every line of text. She did not understand it all, but she recognized the palpable, exhausting deadlock. Lila was also present that day, the 9-year-old brought along by her uncle because no one else could watch her. She sat curled up in a distant corner, clutching her asthma inhaler. Her breaths were labored, yet she stayed silent. Sadie noticed, and her heart clenched. Amid the weariness of a long day, the child's presence made the space feel fragile. Vincent, intent on discussing strategy with his advisors, suddenly turned around. His gaze landed on Lila, and in that moment, his usually icy expression softened, not out of pity, but as if a distant memory had returned. Of the little cousin he once held in his arms, soothed through violent wheezing, sat beside whenever the inhaler ran dry. He walked over and knelt beside her. Gently taking the device, he checked it and then helped Lila use it correctly. Her breathing steadied, and the entire room fell silent. No one spoke, but everyone sensed that small change in his eyes. Sadie watched, her heart stirred. She had never seen Vincent like this, never imagined that a man of his stature could show such tender care. Gratitude welled up in her, tinged with a hidden worry. Lila was too young to be here, but the girl did not appear out of place. After a few minutes, when the tension began to rebuild, Lila suddenly pointed at Sadie, beaming. "That lady draws delivery maps super well. I saw it at the bakery." The words flew like an arrow, piercing the attention of the entire room. All eyes turned to Sadie. She froze, still holding the coffee carafe mid-pour. Vincent turned back. His expression shifted. He did not speak for several seconds, as if weighing belief against doubt. She did not know what to do, whether to explain or apologize. Then his gaze settled on her, this time truly seeing her, not glancing off, not ignoring, but looking deep. "Where's that drawing?" His voice was low, not harsh, but clearly a command. Sadie swallowed hard. She felt her cheeks burn and her chest tighten. She stammered, "I gave it to the assistant, but she threw it in the trash." Silence. The room held its breath, raised eyebrows and looks half mocking, half astonished. A waitress talking about a logistics diagram? A sketch on a napkin? Sadie thought she would be escorted out at once, but after a few thoughtful seconds, Vincent turned back to his team. He looked at each of them in turn, then spoke slowly. "You'll present it in our Monday meeting. We have nothing left to lose." No one objected. No one applauded. But that decisive nod felt like the opening of a door that had always been firmly shut. Sadie stood frozen, unable to believe what she'd heard. Her hand gripped the old napkin in her pocket. That scrap of paper, something she had been ready to discard, was now the last hope for an entire system. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but because for the first time in years, she would stand up, not to serve coffee, but to speak what she truly believed. Monday. Pinnacle's top-floor boardroom was packed. Impeccably pressed suits, matching ties, gleaming polished shoes. Amid that scene, Sadie appeared. Her rumpled navy uniform made her seem like a stray piece in a tapestry of power. But she stood tall, not out of confidence, but because she knew she could not step back now. Beside her lay the drawing, a scrap of napkin transformed into a polished printout on professional paper. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed it before her, opened her laptop, and connected to the large screen. The room's energy dipped as every eye turned to her. They did not know who she was, only that Vincent Caldwell had personally requested her presentation. She began slowly, her voice carrying just enough volume for every word to land clearly. The current system prioritizes by region. It lacks synchronization among warehouses based on real-time demand and timing. I propose a dynamic rotation model driven by inventory data and order flow. The screen shifted to a live simulation. The red congestion points gradually shrank. Routes adjusted fluidly. Within the first 60 minutes, empty mileage dropped by 22%. Not everyone was convinced. A bespectacled older man in the middle row chuckled. "A coffee server teaching us supply chain management? What qualifications do you have?" His words sliced through the already tense air. Sadie remained silent. Her gaze dropped, but she did not turn away. She didn't argue. She didn't need to explain, because before she could speak, Vincent's voice thundered, "Listen to her or step outside." The room fell silent. Nobody reacted. Nobody stood up. Sadie pressed on. Each successive simulation showed improvement. Analysts fixated on the numbers. Order fulfillment rates climbed. Transportation costs fell. Dwell times shortened. Some began taking notes. Others nodded subtly. The atmosphere had shifted. They no longer saw her as the girl behind the coffee counter. They saw someone with true insight. The meeting ran longer than planned. When everyone else had left, only Vincent and Sadie remained, seated side by side before the scrolling data. No one spoke much, yet the distance between them shrank bit by bit, wordlessly. Vincent tilted his head toward her. No longer the icy leader, but simply a man genuinely curious. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, his surprise evident. Sadie turned to him, her eyes unflinching. She answered quietly, honestly. "I studied through online courses, after work, a few hours each night. I wanted to be a logistics engineer, but when my father died, I dropped out to care for my mother and brother." She spoke plainly, without drama, and because of that, her words landed deeper than any lament. Vincent looked at her, his expression softening. He said nothing more, but that slight nod and the sustained gaze told her he understood, and, more than that, he admired her. Not for the drawing alone, not merely for the solution, but for the person beside him. A girl without formal credentials, without a place in that room, yet unwavering in pursuing what she believed was right. A girl who had entered a boardroom of power in bare feet, carrying a will that no one could extinguish. The solution Sadie proposed was not merely a technical upgrade. It was a startling pivot that no one on Pinnacle's executive board could have imagined. Within 3 months, the optimized system she introduced saved the company over $40 million. A figure that forced the leadership to reconsider how they'd ever underestimated a coffee shop waitress. It wasn't just about cost savings. On-time delivery rates climbed nearly 30%, customer complaints plummeted, and investors began to return. A company once teetering on the brink could now hold its head high, and at the center of that transformation was a woman who'd been dismissed simply because of her faded navy apron. Sadie was promoted to project manager, charged with overseeing and rolling out the new system nationwide. Nobody called her the coffee girl anymore. Vincent, who first recognized her hidden value, not only supported her, but also arranged full funding for her to complete the logistics engineering degree she'd once abandoned. "Talent cannot be buried forever," he'd said as he signed the support documents. In the wake of this upheaval, Pinnacle launched an internal recruiting initiative called Hidden Stars. Its goal was not only to discover talent at every level, but to give voice to those once deemed invisible. A training center was established, inspired by Sadie's journey, a place where people like her could learn, practice, and prove themselves. One evening, after the day's work had quieted, Vincent appeared at Sadie's small apartment door. In his hand was the drawing she'd forgotten at the office, a drone delivery network integrated with AI, which she'd sketched on a whim and never expected him to keep. "I'm no great cook, but I'd like to try with you tonight," he said softly, hesitating, not as a boss, but as a man knocking on a small opportunity beyond the workplace. Sadie smiled and stepped aside to invite him in. She retrieved the ingredients for her mother's traditional spicy chili, a dish that had warmed countless chilly evenings in their fatherless home. While she sliced peppers, Vincent struggled with the beans but gave it his all. The tiny kitchen grew warmer with the clinking of spoons against the pot, brief laughter, and the occasional silent exchange of glances. After dinner, they sat at the table, not discussing numbers or logistics models, but unfinished dreams. Sadie spoke of her father, who'd believed she could change the world with her drawings. For his part, Vincent shared something few knew, that he'd grown up in a Cheyenne orphanage. No one had ever believed he'd succeed, and so he learned to place his faith in himself. "You've reminded me that talent can come from anywhere," he said, his gaze steady on her. It was not merely praise, but a deep acknowledgement, from a man who'd once had nothing to a woman once deemed inconsequential. When Vincent left, he paused at her door. No set promise, no specific date, just a look exchanged long enough to spark something quietly glowing. Perhaps a relationship, perhaps a bond beyond work, perhaps both. Sadie gently closed the door, not to shut something out, but to hold on to the echo of an extraordinary evening, where past, present, and future converged. In her heart, a new door had opened, not to a distant dream, but to a journey in progress, and one she would never abandon. Dear friends, if this story has touched you in some way, let us know. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't hesitate to send it to loved ones and friends across the United States. We'd love to hear where and when you're watching. Perhaps from a small kitchen like Sadie's, a new story is beginning too.